I've seen her at the all right, well, thank you everyone for your patience. If we can call everybody in from the outside, so that way we can get started with our special guests, that'd be fantastic. As we mentioned earlier, and while the President's here, we're an organization committed to the First Ward, the city and the county, and even things nationally, made up of neighbors and friends and businesses that keep politics alive and stay busy in the community. So without further ado, we have someone who leads us at the city level, who's always out there, who's always fighting for us, and definitely is someone we can be proud of. So I want to introduce our Alderman Brown.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The President always does that much better than I do. Thank you all for coming. And last week we had the governor, and we're proud to have the President Preckwinkle here this morning. It's great to see so many friends on a beautiful summer day at 10 a.m. It shows the strength of our ward and our community, Madam President. I don't have much to say besides introducing the President. I did want to recognize we've got from our state, Representative Arroyo is here. Louis Arroyo right here. His son, Louis Arroyo Jr. is here as well. Saul De Rivero from the FOP is here from the county. And President, many organizers and people that are just committed to our community. You know as well as I do, when I became committeeman, I wanted to open up the process to our organization and build our organization like it is today, so that we weren't just making decisions behind the scenes, we were making decisions out in the open. And President Preckwinkle, as a committeeman as well, committeewoman of the 4th Ward, led our slating process at the county. And I got to tell you, what a leadership a job that she did, not only in the transparency and the openness, but the firmness that she had in supporting our judges and others that are run countywide. Now you know it's strength. You know you're strong when you're going to run for re-election and you don't have an opponent. And President Preckwinkle at this time has no opponent for running for president. If she should, you know and we know that we're going to go all out in the 1st Ward for President Preckwinkle. As Phil Jones demonstrated, Mr. Phil Jones is going to be a grandpa, right, Phil? Just learned right. Just learned right. Did last time. So, without further ado, please welcome our friend, my friend, the President of Cook County, Toni Preckwinkle.
Everybody.
Good morning.
I'm very grateful to be here today. You know, Preckwinkle Joe and I served together for 4 years before I went to the county board, and of course he was re-elected in 2011, and I know he'll be re-elected in 2015. So he's on his way into city council. You know, I served 5 terms there, was never without opposition. So this is this is a unique circumstance to go into an election and it looks like there might not be anybody running against you. I recommend it though. Let me talk a little bit about the county, and then I'd be happy to take your questions, and I know you have a lot of questions. The county's business is basically public health and public safety. 35% of our budget is public health, 40% is public safety, so 3/4 of every dollar that we spend in the county is on public health and public safety. Now on the public health side, we're blessed. Dr. Ram Raju, who was second in command at the public health system in New York, came in October 2 years ago to run our healthcare system. And so for the first time in a long time, we've got strong visionary leadership in our healthcare system. And let me just say, Ruth Rothstein, who passed away in the last few weeks, and who was a friend, ran the healthcare system for more than a decade. But when she left in 2004, we've had half a dozen different people in charge of our healthcare system over a 6 or 7 year period. Now, even if you've got a well-functioning organization, that kind of turnover at the top, we weakens, destabilizes the institution. And so we're very grateful that we've got a strong leader now and a visionary there. We're working hard on the public health side on our expansion of Medicaid. Some of you may know that we got a waiver from the federal government to start enrolling people in Medicaid who will be eligible in 2014. So we got to enroll them early. And we're enrolling them in the county health system. So we provide not only primary care at our clinics, but we have a couple of dozen agreements with other providers, federally qualified health clinics, not-for-profits that run primary care clinics around the county, so we expand our primary care base. And then we provide the specialty care and the hospital care. The whole program is called County Care. So far, we've taken applications from over 90,000 people that we already serve in one way or another. We serve people in our clinics, we serve people in the FQHCs, we serve people in our hospitals, we serve people who get their meds from us, although they may have doctor's care elsewhere. And we're enrolling those people in county care so that we can get federal support for their care and hopefully provide them with better care as a result. The people of Cook County provide $500 million in care to people who can't afford it every year. $500 million, $500 million. And that's a great thing. But this waiver enables us to get some compensation for the federal government for some of that uncompensated care. We will continue, however, to provide care for people who are a little over the income limits. You have to earn less than $15,000 as an individual and $20,000 as a couple to be eligible. And some people are a little more than that, but not enough really to afford their own insurance, so they come to us anyway. And what I usually say is, healthcare reform in this country was passed with a devil's bargain. And the bargain with the devil was that all the undocumented were excluded. And our healthcare system will continue, as it always has, to serve people who are undocumented. But we won't be compensated for it. So we will continue to have a large volume of uncompensated care, even with this federal support. But I'm grateful for Dr. Raju's leadership and hopeful that we will continue to move on a path towards sustainability in our healthcare system. On the public safety side, we have some real challenges. I got up in Slating the other day and said that half of the judges that we are going to support for the circuit court should be black and brown, because disproportionately the people who come into our criminal justice system are black and brown. In the last 2 weeks I was at the jail. I've been to the jail and to bond court half a dozen times since I got this job. And if you go there, what I said in Slating is, if you go there, you would think that there are no white people in Cook County. That the only people who live here are black and brown, because that's the only people you see in our criminal justice system. And what I usually say is the jail is at the intersection of racism and poverty in this country. So, those of us in this room who have the good fortune to be working, if we got accused of a crime, we'd pay our bond and we'd be out and we'd wait for our trial. But there are many people in the jail who can't afford even very low bonds, even nominal bonds. And as a result, they're in jail. So the jail, some people think, the jail houses our most dangerous criminals. No, it houses the people who can't pay their bonds. Only 10% of the people in the jail are actually serving a sentence. Everybody else is what we call a pre-trial detainee. They're there awaiting their trial. And 70% of those who are awaiting trial, remember, 10% are serving a sentence, 90% are awaiting trial. Of those who are awaiting trial, 70% are awaiting trial for a nonviolent crime. 30% are awaiting trial for murder or rape or robbery or whatever, the things that give people nightmares. And again, they're accused, they're not convicted. So our criminal justice system operates to the detriment of black and brown people across the county, and we're working hard to try to make it more fair and more just, and that's a real challenge. It's an expensive proposition to keep somebody in jail. It costs $143 a day. So if you can't pay a nominal bond of a couple $100, by a week we've paid more in keeping you in the jail than your bond was. So we've got to figure out how to get all of the actors in the criminal justice system to be more focused on making intelligent determinations about who really is a risk, a flight risk, a risk to themselves, a risk to the community, and who really isn't. So there are people in our jail who have families, people have jobs when they went in, although if they stay there long, they won't have them. Who are going to school. You know, they're not really a flight risk. And they're not really a danger. They're accused of a nonviolent crime, not really a danger to themselves or their community. So we've got to figure out how we can dramatically reduce our jail population and speed up the processing of our cases. If we could dispose of our cases, that is the time you go into bond court, the time your case is adjudicated, if we could shorten that time to what it was in 2007, we'd have 1,500, 2,000 fewer people in the jail right there. But it's taking us longer to dispose of cases, and more people are coming into our criminal justice system, and they're almost entirely black and white. So we've got some challenges on the criminal justice side. I worked, when Harold Washington was mayor, long ago and far away, in the Department of Economic Development. And so when I came into office, I said, our main mission clearly is public health and public safety, but we've got to put more emphasis on economic development. So we put together our community development, our capital planning, that's our construction department, our building and zoning, our workforce development, this is our Department of Economic Development. Let's try to be more strategic about our investments. Let's match up our highway investments, our infrastructure investments in the Department of Transportation and Highways with our economic development investments so that we have some synergy there. And so the Bureau of Economic Development has been something we created when we came in and something we've been focused on in addition to our two main obligations, public health and public safety. This job has been a challenge. Joe and I were talking this morning. I spent almost 20 years being alderman. It's quite different. Being alderman is a tremendously satisfying job because you can help so many people. This is more of a management position, and it's a bully pulpit. It's an opportunity to talk about some of the critical issues that our county faces. I miss occasionally being alderman. I'm grateful for your invitation to come today, and I welcome your questions. Thank you. Questions? Yes, sir. If you'd be good enough to tell me who you are, stand up so everybody can hear you.
Fidel Barrera. I mean, given the president's position, how is the relationship with the other elected county officials, and how does that coincide with your synergy task?
All right. So in the city of Chicago, there are 3 citywide elected officials. Only 3: the mayor, the clerk, and the treasurer. But in the county of Cook, in addition to the president of the county, the chief executive, there are 11 other separately elected officials, and that makes it hard to manage. Our main impact on those other elected officials is at budget time, because the budget has to be submitted by the president, so there are negotiations with the other elected officials. But it makes it a challenge, because instead, in the city, these people would all be department heads, and in the county, they're separately elected. So if you think about it, there are 3 members of the Board of Review, which is our taxing body, the assessor, the treasurer, the clerk of the county, the clerk of the court, the sheriff, the chief judge, the state's attorney. I've missed somebody. But anyway, 11 separately elected officials. And so, recorder of deeds, thank you. So it's harder to manage. I usually say it's like herding cats. It's harder to manage because fewer of the people are under the direct supervision or whatever of the president of the board. But we've so far been able to work at least around fiscal issues with the other separately electeds. Yes, sir.
I'm Brian Thompson. What's the state of pension funding in Cook County?
All right, so my chief financial officer likes to say that we have the best house in a bad neighborhood. Our pension funding is at about 50, the last time I checked was 54, 52, something like that. What you want really is closer to 80.
What's the unfunded liability?
I can't tell you the exact amount. All I can tell you is our funding level, which is in the 50s. Now, there are city pension funds that are in the 30s, 30% funded. We spent a year and a half, 18 months working with our unions. We shared actuaries, those are the number crunchers who figure out what your pension obligations are going to be over time. make predictions, projections, whatever you want to call it. We brought those people into our meetings with the unions. We made some progress. In contrast to the city and state, we were willing to put money on the table. That is, the county was willing to up its contributions to the pensions and otherwise enhance pension benefits. We talked about picking up the cost of retiree health care, for example. And then what happened in the beginning of May is all the attention changed to Springfield. And although our unions were physically present, their attention was clearly focused elsewhere, because the feeling is that whatever happens in Springfield will be a pattern for the city and the state. So we're kind of waiting to see what comes out of this pension committee, this joint committee of the House and Senate, and that's headed by Senator Raul, before we proceed with our unions, with our negotiations. But this is let me say, our bonds are really downgraded just in the last 2 weeks by Moody's. Fitch did not choose to lower our bond rating. Moody's did. And this is not something arcane and incomprehensible. The direct effect is it costs you more to borrow money when you want to do things. Okay? That's what happens when your bond rating gets lower. Illinois has the lowest bond rating in the country at the moment because of our inability to work through our pension and fiscal issues. And that has a ripple effect on everybody else. I mean, basically, what happened to us, Cook County government, is we're in the state of Illinois. There's this terrible pension crisis looming at every level, and therefore they lowered our bond rating. And they said, you know, we're doing well in managing our own money, but basically you're in the state of Illinois, and you pay a penalty for that. So I am hopeful that there'll be some agreement that comes out of Springfield this fall. If there is not, we will continue to try to work with our unions to do something for our retirees and workers alone. But this is this crisis didn't come upon us overnight. You know, it's not something that just happened. It's the result of decades of bad faith activity on the part of the state of Illinois. So I've been a public employee for more than 20 years. Any of you who are public employees or were public employees, you know your pension contribution is taken out of your check. There's no pension holiday. You don't get to say, today this paycheck I'm not going to contribute to my pension. But in the state of Illinois, for many, many years, for decades, the state decided they were going to balance their budget by taking pension holidays and not putting money into the pension fund. Now we've never done that in Cook County. It's just horribly irresponsible. The stock market crash would have hurt every pension fund no matter, but when you didn't properly fund your pensions to the level you committed to, you know, it's been disastrous. So we're in a bad spot in Illinois because of the unwillingness to make tough decisions for decades. And all of us at every level of government are paying the price for that. More questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Orca Sawala, and I want to clarify what undocumented did not pay for their services. They do pay taxes. Every day we go out there and shop or something, we're paying taxes. So it's misleading. The Obama right now trying to pass the immigration reform to make it look like undocumented are a burden to our country. They're not, because that's what keeps this economy going. They're working in the fields, cutting grass, working in construction, and they're not even paying the fair rate. And second of all, the health department said you're putting 35 cents out of the dollars. We close down a lot of clinics that help do prevention, avoid people from going to the jails, costing $34,000 a year per inmate.
So first of all, please understand, when I talked about the passage of health care reform being a bargain with the devil, what I meant was that it was a bargain with the devil to get votes for health care reform by excluding the undocumented. In other words, in order to get the votes to pass health care reform, they excluded the undocumented. In my view, that's a bargain with the devil. It was a terrible thing to do. Okay? Let me just be clear about that. Our health care system has always served anybody who walks in the door, regardless of whether or not they have insurance, regardless of whether or not they have papers. Okay? I agree with the contribution that immigrants have always made to this country. I mean, it's a nation we have a very small Native American population. Everybody else is the descendants of immigrants and slaves. Okay? Everybody else. So the idea that we make such a fuss about the difference between those who are documented and undocumented is pretty ironic historically in this country. Because there have always been large numbers of people who came here without papers. It's just they weren't brown. So, I mean, so please understand me. You know, I'm not, and frankly, look, I I've been critical of the president. I wish he had decided to take up immigration reform sooner. I wish they hadn't made this deal in healthcare reform to exclude the undocumented. They're in a tough spot. I represent a county that's 80% Democratic. The country's pretty evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. It's much harder to do progressive things as president than it is in Cook County. Because I know that this is a Democratic county and I will get broad support for some of the things I talk about. He's in a much different spot. Yes, sir.
And then it's for you. And the question I have is regarding the economic development. To what extent is your office working with the mayor and with the governor to bring more jobs into the city, into the state? Because obviously a lot of jobs there. This did not happen overnight. It happened over the last 25 years. But labor or wages are getting expensive in India and in China. Eventually, I think those jobs are going to come back. But at the moment, to create some incentives as well, working with the federal government.
We have a Bureau of Economic Development. We work with the State Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO. We work on a number of projects with the mayor. Actually, before the mayor was sworn in, but after he was elected, we met for lunch, and we agreed that it didn't make sense that we shared a building, we shared the city-county building downtown, but there was virtually no interaction between the city and county government. So we put together a city-county task force to look at ways we could cooperate. They came up with a couple dozen ideas, and we've been working on those. Some of them are joint purchasing. You know, it makes sense. Everybody buys Xerox paper. But if you put the spend of the city and the county together, it's much bigger, and you get a better price, right, when you go in the marketplace. We've put together our workforce training initiatives. We've put together, as I said, purchasing, workforce training, printing. It turns out, had a much better print shop than they do. So we do some things for them, and they do some things for us. So there are all kinds of things that we've worked on together, including economic development. Thank you. Yeah, there was one question back here about clinics, and I didn't get to that. Thank you. So the city, we're not closing clinics in the county. Actually, we're making deals with other people who have primary care clinics to bring them into our system. The city has been closing clinics, especially mental health clinics. And it's true, when you close a mental health clinic, it impacts our health and hospital system, because people don't take their meds, they get sick. And it impacts our criminal justice system, because sometimes when people don't take their meds, they act out in ways that they end up in the jail. Okay? So, in my view, it's penny wise and pound foolish to close mental health clinics. Yes, sir.
Good morning, my name is Thomas. Yesterday in the Chicago Tribune, Mary Smeech wrote an article about the two women running for mayor of the city of Paris. She then said she wanted to enumerate all the qualified women in the city of Chicago who would be qualified to run as mayor. And she mentioned Toni Preckwinkle, and then she mentioned Toni Preckwinkle, and then she mentioned Toni Preckwinkle. She felt were qualified to run for mayor for the city of Chicago. And I'm not going to ask you the question I would like to, but I'm going to ask you, would you ever like to be mayor of the city of Chicago?
Well, let me just say, I served in the city council for 19 years and I loved it. I've been president of the board for almost 3 years. When I was elected alderman, I saw that there were a number of things that needed to be done. I lived in the community around the University of Chicago, but the communities to the north and west of us were really struggling. Fires, gang and drug activity, terrible schools. And I said, look, what I said to my constituents in Hyde Park and South Kenwood was, I will be elected, and I was elected by the people who would elect me, namely them, but I was going to have to serve the people who needed service. We were going to have to rebuild the communities around us, because we couldn't be an island in the middle of struggling neighborhoods and expect that our neighborhood would be healthy in the long run. So I spent 19 years on a lot of work revitalizing, trying to work to revitalize Grand Boulevard, North Kenwood, Oakland, Douglas. And those communities are very different than they were when I came into office 19 years before. You know, I feel like when I said I wanted this job, there were things I wanted to do. I wanted to try to make our healthcare system sustainable in the long run. And we've got good leadership now, and we're on that path. I want to do something about our criminal justice system, which, as I've said repeatedly, disproportionately impacts black and brown young men and destroys lives over stupid things like low-level drug offenses. And I feel like I've got a lot of work to do there. So I'm going to run for re-election, and I'm going to try to work on those things that I committed to when I ran 3 years ago. Yes, sir.
My name is Neiman Azan. I was wondering what alternatives you were looking at in terms of bonds or individuals waiting trial?
Sure. We've put money into alternatives to detention. So, for example, many people come into our criminal justice system as a result of their addiction. They're arrested on low-level drug charges, or, as is often pointed out to me, they're arrested for shoplifting, because that's the way they get money for their drugs, or prostitution, because that's the way they get money for their drugs. And we're trying to get people into places like Haymarket, which is a drug treatment facility, as they await their trial, or a place like a Safe Haven, where again they have residential facilities and support services to help people kind of get their lives turned around while they wait their trial. It's much better to put them in drug treatment or a Safe Haven or some of the other they're not halfway houses exactly, but places where people can be housed as they await their trials, than to leave them in the jail, where they get no service and where it costs us $143 a day. It's most expensive to keep people in the jail. We can give them drug treatment. We can provide them with programs like day reporting, where they go to the jail for the day, but they get substance abuse treatment in the morning, and then they get afternoon education or job training. And then they go home at night. So we don't house them overnight. We just feed them lunch. But they get help, they get support. All those things are cheaper than keeping people in the jail where they get no help at all. So we're trying to move resources to alternatives to detention, rather than investing so much in the jail. But the problem is that 80%, half of the population of the county is in Chicago, but 80% of the people of our jail come from the city of Chicago. And so the jail population is driven by policing strategies in the city of Chicago over which we have no control. So if they're sweeping up kids, which they're doing, and putting them in the criminal justice system, that taxes our jail. And what I like to say about this, so my view isn't the same as the police superintendent, let me be quite clear. So if we're all standing around on the corner, and there are 1 or 2 bad actors in the group, if they arrest everybody, they'll get the 1 or 2 bad actors, but they'll destroy the lives of everybody else.
I agree.
All right, so that's what's happening. They're doing these sweeps. They, pick up a lot of kids. They're hanging out. Some of them may actually be guilty of bad acts, but many of them are just at the margins, right? And now they're thrown into the criminal justice system, which I think is counterproductive and extraordinarily expensive. I had a conversation 2 months ago with a judge that I know who was talking about the fact that the city of Chicago voted, and I think your alderman voted for it, to give tickets out for low-level marijuana.
Co-sponsored it.
Co-sponsored it, better yet. But he gave the police the option of doing this. And what she wanted to tell me was, they're not doing it. They may ticket the white kids at Lollapalooza, but in our neighborhoods, they're arresting the kids, right? They're arresting the kids. So they continue to arrest them for low-level drug offenses. She said, they're also arresting the kids for throwing dice on the sidewalk, charging them with state offenses, gambling offenses, and bringing them into the criminal justice system. Well, I would argue that throwing dice on the sidewalk is not something that should have you end up in our criminal justice system. But as I said, the policing strategies of the city of Chicago drive our jail population. And it's not something over which I have any control.
Can I add something to that? But it's also the judge. The judge allows it, instead of throwing it out, he allows it and gives the kid a sentence.
Right.
Puts them in
There
jail.
are lots of, so full disclosure, the judge of whom I was speaking was a Latino judge. And she was somebody that I helped and supported to get on the bench. And she just wanted to tell me what was happening in the communities where she was a judge. Yeah, it's about the judges too. As I said, it's all the actors in the criminal justice system. It's the police. You know, some kids hanging out in the corner, the police tell them to go home, you know? And some kids hanging out in the corner, they bring them to the police station. And some kids who come to the police station, their parents get called, and they're taken home by their parents, and other kids go in the lockup. At every point, decisions are made that disproportionately impact black and brown kids, and they're more likely to end up in our criminal justice system. And they're more likely to get heavier sentences than white kids. That's brutal, that's the brutal truth. For the same offense, roughly the same background, same offense. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jorge Zavala, and I'm actually interested more in kind of building up on the violence issues. I know that the governor was trying to implement an anti-violence commission in the state of Illinois, so I didn't know what the status was regarding the anti-violence commission, and if it's either already working, actively working, or if it's just something that's being developed, because I actively work with children of all ages from 8 to 17 who benefit heavily from different statewide programs and citywide programs that allow them to receive complimentary breakfast at their schools, or encourage them to work with nonprofits such as Chicago Run to engage in their first run, their first mile. So I wanted to know if there these anti-violence, anti-bullying campaigns exist within the city of Chicago in particular, or within Cook County as a whole. And if there are working programs where they are primarily working from, and where we could possibly find out more information about these programs.
Sure. First of all, I'll give you my quote. We have a Justice Advisory Council, and we're trying to shift resources away from the jail and the criminal justice system into anti-violence and anti-prevention, anti-recidivism initiatives. So this year we spent a modest amount of money, about $400,000 for anti-recidivism initiatives, so that's trying to keep people from returning to the criminal justice system once they've gotten in, and anti-violence initiatives. We put a couple $1 million in that to support entities across the county that are working in particular with high-risk kids who are working with people who are coming out of our criminal justice system, adults and children, young people, juveniles. So we've put, over the last couple years, more emphasis on that, and we're trying to move resources toward anti-recidivism or recidivism reduction is what we call it, and anti-violence initiatives. You know, the mayor has raised some money in the private sector to do anti-violence initiatives, and he and I have worked together on what's called One Summer Plus Chicago this past summer, and that was an initiative to find jobs and tutoring help for some of our most at-risk kids. So the kids that were identified by the Chicago Public Schools as being at risk either to be the victims of violence or the perpetrators of violence. So those high-risk kids were in One Summer Plus, and the University of Chicago did a study of whether or not they got in trouble this summer, and most of them stayed out of trouble. And it's because, of course, we kept them busy and paid them. So the combination of activity and reward was successful in keeping them out of trouble. We've got to invest a lot more in things like that, not just for the summer, but year-round. And I can't tell you, frankly, where the state initiative is going because I don't know much of that. Yes, ma'am.
So a lot of these programs, like One Summer, One Chicago, the CTA, Apprentice Program, are for ex-offenders with nonviolent crimes. Are there any programs coming up that would help ex-offenders with violent offenses?
The recidivism reduction grants that we gave, and again, it was a pretty modest amount, $400,000, and it was $80,000 to 5 different entities across the county, were for people who were ex-offenders, and there was no distinction between those nonviolent and violent. So we're putting money into recidivism reduction regardless of what the offense was that you served time for. I can't tell you what other people are doing. Yes, ma'am.
Question on ethics reform. I appreciate you explaining your position on that, considering issues around Barrios, who you supported in 2010. In 2012, you supported trying to get the $10,000 in fines that he hadn't paid.
Right.
And then you let go of the woman that was leading this as the executive director, Ms. Foster. Could you explain?
Sure. I didn't think she was doing a good job running the agency. I replaced her with a young man named Ranjit Hakim, and I think Ron will do a good job. And I remain committed to pursuing the case. So here's what doesn't work with sound bites. Okay? Now, I supported Joe. He's chairman of the party. I've been a committeeman since 1992, and it's only since Joe became chairman of the party, that there was a real effort to try to make the candidates that we slate in Cook County for the Democratic nominations reflective of our county by gender and race. So it was only when he came on board that we started slating more women. For the first time, we slated Latinos in county-wide races. We slated African Americans. So let me just be clear, I'm grateful to Joe for his leadership in the party and trying to make it more inclusive and reflective of what our county's really like. Now on the ethics issue, I've never hired anybody in my family. It's a bad idea. What I say, if you hire family and friends, it makes people think that government is only for your family and friends. So this is something on which Joe and I profoundly disagree, and we've had this conversation. And I support the effort to follow up on his ethics violations, in my view, and this is being fought out in court. By the way, he's not the only separately elected official who argues that our ethics laws don't apply to him. There are others, of those 11 separately elected, remember them, 11? Who think the same thing, and they're waiting to see how Joe's case comes out. Okay? My view is that our ethics ordinance should apply to everybody in the county, all the separately elected officials, as well as people in the president's office. All right. So I'm coming back to Joe. I supported him in 2010. He ran in November against Forrest Claypool, who some of you in this room may have supported. I don't know. My view is I'm a Democrat. If you want to be a Democrat, run in the Democratic primary. Forrest Claypool is a Democrat, but he didn't run as a Democrat. He thought he had a chance, as a third-party candidate against Joe in the fall. My view is, if you're a Democrat, run in the Democratic primary, because if you want to run for office. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, the fact that I disagree with Joe about hiring family and friends doesn't mean I don't think he's run his office well. He has. He's been one of the first people who stepped up to cut his budget when we had to make 17% cuts in the budget in the first year. And he has, because he's assessor and he's the first person to take the bite at this, helped us get the tax bills out on time. This is the second year in a row we've done it, after 34 years of missing the deadlines. 34 years, more than 3 decades, they didn't get it right. And the last 2 years they got it right twice in a row. And it's because the assessor did his job, so everybody else who came after him could get their jobs done as well. So I think he's done a good job in running his office, even though I disagree with him about hiring family and friends. This is a complicated message. Some people say, how come you defend Joe Barrios when he does this and this? I said, well, first of all, I challenge him on that. And secondly, I think he's done a good job running his office. If you can hold both of those things in your head at the same time, they're not mutually exclusive. So, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yes?
My name is Maria Schlegel, and I am the founder of Cibola Tech Incubator.
Of what?
Cibola is a tech incubator in Pilsen.
Okay.
Focused on diversity in the technology community.
All right.
My question is that our community is very interested in hardware and advanced manufacturing, and with that, advanced manufacturing and logistics having been identified as a driver of economic strategy within the city of Chicago, how will the county be supportive of that infrastructure growth so that members of communities such as the Forest Corridor, as our community in Pilsen, are able to engage with the economic job growth and jobs brought about by that new strategy?
Okay, well, so first of all, here's my card. But the second thing is, we put a lot of emphasis on technology. So I'm not a tech person. I freely admit I'm not a tech person. But we've got some good tech people. We have a new media council, so people focusing. You know about that? All right. All right, so we got a new media council helping us focus on new media. We've put a lot of emphasis on trying to figure out how to ratchet up our information technology within the county. So let me just tell you where we are. It's not that we have 20th century technology, we have 19th century technology. Yes. If you go into our courtrooms, in bond court for example, they use carbon paper. Okay? So that's 19th century technology. It isn't even 20th century technology. So we've got a lot of work to do in upgrading our information technology systems, our information systems. And we're trying to get people on the public safety side to all agree on, putting forms on a computer screen instead of writing things out by hand. And so you just, you touch the screen and fill things in as opposed to writing things out on carbon paper. But we haven't got everybody to agree. This is, again, it's all these separately elected officials. All of them have to agree on how we're going to proceed. And we've only computerized as a pilot one part of the court system, and that's one of the smallest parts. It's not the criminal justice side. So we've got a lot of work to do, I guess I'd say. We're prepared to work with you in our Bureau of Economic Development around some of these issues. We've got internal challenges as well as trying to work with external partners. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is...
President got time for 2 more questions.
Sure. My name is Yvette Soto, and I was recently a patient at Stroger Hospital. And first of all, I have to say that I'm a beneficiary of all the wonderful things that you have been talking about, the healthcare system that has been happening here in Cook County. In April, I started a process of, I had something in my throat. In the end, I had a tumor removed, which was like 2 weeks ago. However, my experience spent in Stroger Hospital was probably one of the worst experiences ever. I didn't see that they were very clean. I saw a lot of the nurses fighting amongst themselves. I mean, I saw a patient, excuse my language, puke on the floor. They left it there for an hour before somebody came to pick it up. And only because I said, you want me to pick it up, I will pick it up. And I had just gotten out of surgery because I don't like to be in a place that is dirty. In my house, I clean, and I think a hospital should be clean as well. Those are some of the issues that I think need to be addressed. Attitudes, the quality of service, when you come to be a patient at this location. I mean, first of all, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to go to Stroger Hospital because I do understand that they are one of the #1 hospitals in surgeons. They're the best.
Right.
They're the best. But I think these 2 issues do not make it the best overall experience.
We've got some terrible challenges. First of all, if you call me, I will have somebody from the hospital system get back to you so they can follow up. We have a challenge. We've run a system of last resort for a very long time. A system that served people who had no insurance, had no resources, and we provided care for them. But in the new environment, with healthcare reform, we're going to have to provide not just service of the last resort, but service of choice. So we're going to have to learn to treat our patients better and keep our hospital in better shape and make the patient experience better. So you're grateful for the good care you got when you needed it. But you should come out of Stroger feeling good about the hospital as well. Not just that that you had the surgery and it was life-saving or whatever, right?
I want to because you know what? There are a lot of good people there. I see it. I see that there are a lot of good people working there. So
Right.
I agree.
Well, so what Dr. Raju says, and he's involved in trying to change the culture in our Cook County health system. Because sometimes when people serve those who have no resources, they think they don't need to provide good service to them. The fact that they're giving them care is good enough. It's not. They've got to provide good service. So that's been his emphasis. We've got to provide the kind of patient experience that makes people want to come back to our system. So I'm sorry you didn't get good service.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
Back in 2011 of October, the day I was at St. Mary's, they had to perform and removed a tumor from me, which was cancer. But at the same time, he says, sorry, sir, you don't have any insurance. Your insurance was just pulled by a Walgreens. And so I had to go to Stroger to finish my treatment. Sorry that you had those worst days. My worst day was going through the beginning. But once I got through there, every clinic I went to, these people were on top of it. I'm alive today because of Stroger. I went in there, I had 6 chemo treatments. Chemo was good. Things are good. I go back in there in September. Yeah, I understand. There's some days you see a lot of different kind of people there. This place is packed with people that don't have insurance, that don't have nothing, but they have things that don't go to the hospital regularly. I'm one of those guys. I don't go to the hospital regularly, but this tumor had me bent over constantly. So all I've got to say is, yeah, some of the things that kind of went up, you guys started charging us for parking, our prescriptions went up, but knowing that those little things have to happen, but I just want to let her know, the majority of my time was well spent, and I was treated very well. I even had to go in there on Christmas because my fever was 102. Boom, they took care of me that day, made sure I was good, and even got me out of there the very next day so I can enjoy my holidays. So that's all I want to say. And by the way, thank you for coming to the first word.
I'm glad you had Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to come to the first ward.
Thank you. So our organization is called First Ward First. We'd like to extend to you an honorary membership, and you get this wonderful First Ward First t-shirt with the number 1 on the back. All right, it's going to be accepted. That's for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, President Preckwinkle. Appreciate it.
Sure enough.
Remember, we've got our street festival this coming weekend. If we need volunteers, please see me or someone with the staff to sign up. Thank you all for coming. I'll be around for a while.